thought my voice was good enough. Is that not the case? Okay, I'll do a few notices now while the wizards are getting the clouds in order. I know that's going to be difficult for me. Hang on. I could do it a light, but anyway, this will do. Okay. The CPS closing dates, you'll have had from Diana's email, but the main ones, the important ones are tonight at midnight, projected image 2 is starting, and also the 30th closing, projected image 2 tonight, and the 31st of March is the closing date for submissions for New Zealand camera. I'll just tell me when you're ready to go, okay? I'll carry on. Our next meeting will be the 19th of March. It is a 7 to possibly 7 through till 9 p.m. practical session. You need to bring your camera. There will be light boxes and there will be some cymatics. If you don't know what that is, you'll find out next week with Craig Purton. Remember to bring along anything suitable for use on a light box, that is generally two-dimensional things rather than three-dimensional things. Flat flowers, for example, and anything else that you think would make a good photograph with the light going through it. Sliced fruit works and things like that. Are there any other notices or anything that I need to announce, which we'll do now, but rather than after the show? Have I forgotten anything? Okay. I'd like to introduce Jane Barnes, who you all know well, and she's going to introduce the rest of today's program.
Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce Mike Browne, who is an English photographer, presenter. I can't even read my notes. He's got a YouTube channel with 26 million views, 260,000 subscribers. He runs photography workshops and has courses, online courses, and all sorts of things like that. I met him through the Facebook group he started during lockdown, and which is still going. And somebody from here joined it last week, which is nice. But what else do I have to say, Mike?
I don't know.
Hang on, you're a speaker. You do workshops. Yes, I've done all that sort of stuff. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Mike is a renowned teacher for photography. He says on our live feedbacks that he's our coach. So is very good at giving feedback. And he's just a really, really nice guy. And he's been told that he's the friendliest photographer coach, or
Friendliest photo expert in the
go.
UK was from.
So can we put your hands together for Mike Browne, please?
Wow. Thank you very much indeed, Christchurch Photographic Society. It's a pleasure to be here. The wonders of technology, which I am hopeless at, allow us to do these things. I wish I could be in the room with you, because there is a whole different kind of a dynamic to being live and in the room, and people can interrupt along the way. If you've got a question you want to interrupt, then please do. So tonight's talk is less about cameras and settings and creating beautiful pictures, but also photography as time travel. So look at that, I can see you all. That's fantastic. Hello, give us a wave. That's fantastic. I so wish I was there. But anyway, I'll tell you what, why don't I just start my slideshow, and please someone tell me if it's going wrong. Because, you know, right now I just feel like I'm this lonely person sitting in a room in the early morning in the UK talking to myself. And I know you're there. Right, bear with me. I'm going to need to share my screen. Right, so things are starting, get off. Things are starting to come together. Okay. Someone interrupt. If something goes wrong, tell me, because I can't see you guys anymore. I really am sitting in a room on my own talking to a computer. So life lessons caught on camera. This is really like my journey from very humble beginnings. And I hope you find some inspiration in it for your own journeys, because, you know, we're all on these journeys in life. I was going to show you first just a little slideshow with some of my work on it, just to kind of establish, you know, what I can do, what I get up to. But also, I think I have quite an eclectic taste in what I like to photograph. So, let me know if this works, please. You should hear some music with it. Oh, that didn't work, did it? No, why isn't it working? So hopefully that gives you a flavour of some of the sorts of things I'm into. I forgot to say, if you want to interrupt, please do so. I believe Jane's got a microphone. She can come and walk around the room and all that sort of thing. Is everybody there? Can you all still hear me?
Yep.
Good. Thank you very much. Because, yeah, I'm just looking at a computer on my own. So I think my taste in photos, what I like to photograph, is fairly eclectic. I like all sorts of things. But, you know, real question here. You know, please throw your hands up. What are photos? Anyone want to throw something out there? What do you think? What are photos?
Hang on.
Art?
Art. Yeah, good response. Anyone else? Let's get a few.
Record shots.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Yeah.
Any more?
Communication.
Communication. Yeah, that is an excellent one. Come on, let's have one more.
Records of light?
Records of light. Yay, absolutely. Yeah. And these are all completely valid. And actually, it ties in really rather well because I say they're all of those things, and they're also time travel. When you look at your phone, we've got these amazing devices called a phone these days, which you can record anything. Yeah, okay, we all like to go out with our cameras and use lenses and all that good stuff. But also, we have this little camera in our pocket all the time. And when we're doing that, it's so annoying. I haven't got a little in-screen window because you better see my arms waving around and what I'm doing. But when we scroll through those pictures, we're time traveling. We are moving through time. We're going back to moments and little pieces of history. And does anyone notice if you look at a photograph and you really look at it and remember that moment, does anyone else get transported back emotionally to that moment in time? And you start to remember other things. Does anyone else feel that? Just shout yes in general if you do and no if you don't. Yeah, okay. And this is one, I think, of the key things with photography, because not only is it art, is it, you know, a form of record keeping, of communicating with others and recording the play of light, and that is the big one, absolutely. It is also this time travel, both visually, but also, I think, emotionally, because we can transport ourselves back to different times. And we can use our little albums on our phones. So those days when, you know, when things are annoying, the tech doesn't work, there's a pothole in the road, the car's got a puncture, and we're losing our shit over stuff, which really isn't that important. Let's have a little time travel. Here's my brother and I traveling through time. And it's like each one of those pictures, for me personally, has stuff attached to it. And I remember the moments completely. The one top left, we had that old hand cart. We grew up on a little farm, you know, and I remember we found some paint and we painted it, and it was this sticky, horrible mess for ages. It was a terrible mess. But, you know, I remember everything. The temperature, the smell in the air, the, you know, all that good stuff that goes with it. The one in the middle, I don't know how old was I there, probably in my 20s. My brother and I, somewhat drunk, dancing in a field to a band. And I don't really drink, never really have. It only takes about 2 drinks and I'm gone. But yeah, it's one of the few moments ever caught on camera when I was drunk. And then in the bottom right corner, there we are 2 Christmases ago in the kitchen at his house. And all these things evoke memories. When we look at an image, these things can be incredibly powerful and evocative. And so this is a little bit of life lessons caught on camera than my life lessons caught on camera. We grew up, as I said, on a little farm out in the middle of nowhere. I grew up on my own, surrounded by adults. There were no other kids to play with. And it used to worry my mother something wicked about the fact that I was growing up kind of in isolation. I could have a fantastic conversation with the guy who came out to fix the tractor, or the plumber, or the farrier who came out to put new hooves on the horses. I understood all sorts of things that little kids probably didn't, because I grew up with adults. I could have a great conversation with all of them. But I never really kind of connected with kids. It's just one of those things. And I've had a pretty remarkable journey, which I never imagined could happen. So you got a picture there of me driving a digger back in, whoa, when was that? 1980s at some point, early 1980s, probably. And if you spoke to that person back then about, you know, what do you imagine the future to be? Of course, we don't know our future. But I would never in a million years have imagined that one day I would stand on a stage at probably the most prestigious photography festival on the planet, the Exposure International Photography Festival, and be handed an award by the deputy ruler of Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. As time's gone, I've got 3 of those now, and I just never ever would have imagined it. I mean, I'm guessing you guys sitting there, you've all got your own journey. You've all traveled through life doing whatever it is. Did any of you imagine you'd be sitting where you are now? No? Yeah. And I mean, maybe 1 or 2 of you do, you know, through, you know, you planned and made a plan and all the rest of it. I was much too irresponsible, but it was an interesting journey. Oh, that was supposed to change slides and it didn't. Let me do it that way. So like 2 little moments, look at that cute little kid on the left. What happened? What went wrong? But in that moment, I can remember pretending to prune the roses because I'd watched one of my parents doing it out in the back garden. I remember my father, he had this old Kodak camera. You know, does anyone remember those things? It was like a little clip on the front and the front folded down and the lens sort of popped out on a little bellows. I remember him taking that photograph of me, standing there pretending to prune roses because I'd watched my mum do it. And the one on the right, where I'm looking a little bit defensive, warm, sunny day. Oh, what happened? There we go, when the tech goes wrong. This happens to me quite a lot and it drives me insane. Forgive me. I'm guessing you've just lost the slideshow. Yeah, okay, let me see if I can get it back. Right, there it is. I had to install something from Microsoft on my computer for a job that I'm doing elsewhere. And I don't know why, but it does that every so often. So apologies, I don't know how to fix it. A little bit defensive, standing there on the right. It's about the time I went to school. And I hated school. It was an appalling experience for me. I'd grown up in the company of adults, out on a farm. I could have a great conversation with all those people that I mentioned. And then suddenly being thrown into this world of kids. And they're all fighting and screaming and yelling, and 1 minute they're best friends and 1 minute they're mortal enemies. And I just didn't fit in. This sounds terribly arrogant, but I'd look at them all and think, you are so childish. And so, of course, I was the one who went and hid quietly in the corner of the playground. My poor mother used to have to deliver me to the school and have me torn from her because I was clinging on and like, no, I don't, I hate this. She later told me, you know, every day it just broke her heart. I didn't understand school. The other problem I had with school is that I now know I am what is called dyslexic. I didn't know that, and I didn't know what it was. I couldn't read or count or anything like that, and probably until I was 7 or 8. And that was down to an amazing older teacher that I had. Now, my savior during those horrible years at school was, let's see if this will work. No, let me try again from here. Here we go. This magazine, National Geographic. My parents had a big stack of them behind the sofa, all dusty. I don't know if anyone else had that experience as well. But I would spend hours with these National Geographics, staring at the pictures, these amazing photographs of these incredible places. And I'd imagine it was me in that Land Rover driving through that jungle. It was me in that spacesuit exploring the moon. And I'd lose myself in these for hours and hours and hours. And I'd take them to school with me and just stare at these pictures. It was my escape, my own little universe. And it was these photographs which really caught me because I couldn't read. I didn't understand reading. Why did I need it? Teachers used to say things like, you know, read this, the cat sat on the mat. My approach, of course, was, well, I can see the cat sitting on the mat. Why on earth do I need to read about it? What is the point of reading? Much the same with writing. And I used to call writing squiggly lines. Then one day, this wonderful older teacher called Mrs. Wass, she was well into her 70s. She just still taught at the school because she just loved teaching. She came up and she looked over my shoulder at this National Geographic that I was staring at. And she said, so, you know, what are you looking at? Why is it? And I don't remember the picture, but it was something to do with you know, maybe it was some guy, some jungle, people wearing these strange clothes and, you know, in this odd place, which was so unlike our own. And she said to me, now, if you could read those squiggly lines, as you call them, it would tell you more about the picture. And I remember saying to her, what do you mean? She said, well, where are they? Why are they there? What does the world smell like? What are they doing? What do they eat? Why do they live in those strange mud huts instead of proper houses with bricks and windows? And suddenly the penny dropped. It was like, so that's what reading is for. No one had told me. It wasn't the cat sat on the mat. It was a doorway into a whole new world. And it complemented these incredible images. And so I learned to read. Now, if it wasn't for that teacher and for that moment, I don't know, would I have ever ended up on that stage? But those images in National Geographic, they certainly had a long-lasting impact upon me. Now, at age 15, I walked out of school. I hated it so much, and I really couldn't see the point. Even over the last year, I didn't even go very often. I would get on my bicycle and tell my parents, yeah, I'm going to cycle to school today, and I just didn't go. I spent weeks of not appearing at school. I went one day and the teacher said, oh, you've deigned to come to school today, have you, Browne? Go and hide in the back of the classroom. So age 15, when I was bigger and older, I thought, I'm just not going. This is a complete waste of time. All I wanted to do was to get a job and to become independent, to be able to forge a path in life, and also to explore some of this magical world that I had seen in all these incredible pictures in our National Geographic magazines. So I left school and I got a job working on a farm. Imagine being 16 and a boy in love with machines and all the rest of it, and be given that great big blue and white tractor in the top left-hand corner to play with. I'm 16 and I've got this fantastic toy. Time progressed, they taught me how to use the combine harvester the following year. And then one day they said, right, that old blue Fulton, it's all worn out. They bought a brand new Massey Ferguson 590. And I just remember everything about it. Just looking at that photograph, I remember the way the doors opened, the fact that it had a cab, a proper cab that's kept you warm or blew cold air at you in the winter. Remember how it smelt, how it felt, and how I felt when I was using it, when I was driving it. I was like 10 feet tall. And it may sound silly, but just looking at those pictures, it does transport me back. And those things become alive for me. Now, one day I was outside our tractor shed on the wash, cleaning my shiny 590 Massey Ferguson tractor. And the radio was playing. Toto. Does anyone remember that song, Africa by Toto? Just shout yes if you did. Yeah. And out of nowhere, I don't know where thoughts and ideas come from. They're crucial for photography, obviously. But out of nowhere, this thought hit me smack between the eyes. I want to go and ride a motorbike through Africa. I'm going to do it. And I started working all the overtime that I could, and I was saving money and I was putting it away and had this crazy idea. I was going to go and buy this motorbike and I was going to go and ride through Africa and go and see some of these places I'd seen in National Geographic in these photographs. See what it's like inside that mud hut. See what it's like to drink the blood of a cow, you know, which I have done since. But anyway, I'm saving money and I'm trying to put things together to go and travel. And then one day, I was on my way to Cornwall on a motorcycle when I had a crash. That is that particular motorcycle, all bent up. I'm the luckiest guy in the world because I was traveling at 80 miles an hour and a car did a handbrake turn as I went to go past it and I just went bang, straight into the side of it. And I came to in hospital. I didn't even cut myself. Luckiest guy in the world. Now, I had 3 months, I think it was, off work. I had a fractured shoulder, I had a fractured wrist, a fractured shin, and a broken rib. That's all I sustained. Luckiest guy in the world. I very soon learned that even though my right hand was in a plaster cast, I could get on my other bike, which you can just see in the corner of that photograph. This was on the farm where we lived. This is where I had that crashed one stored in one of the stables, which we weren't using. I discovered I could still, sorry, I'm doing actions, you can't see me. I could still operate the motorcycle even with my wrist in a plaster cast. And I was free. I could escape because I was getting really, really bored walking around and around in circles waiting to heal. One of my friends used to work for the local police. She was the civilian employee. She operated the radios, worked on the desk, taking notes, whatever it is that they do. And she worked shift. And so I'd often get on my bike and go and visit this girl. She was really a friend of a friend. We didn't know each other that well. But I started going to see Kate. And over time, we started to become very close. And a relationship started to develop. Now, Kate also liked motorcycles and machines and weird things. This is a contraption she used to whiz around in. And no matter how hard I tried not to fall in love with Kate, it happened. Sorry, guys, I don't know why. I've suddenly started getting terrible looping feedback. I'm hearing myself echo. I'm not quite sure what it is. Is everything all right your end? Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. I used to try really hard. No, I used to try. I tried so hard not to fall in love with Kate because I wanted to go on this adventure. I was saving this money. I wanted to go and travel through Africa. But no matter how hard I tried, the inevitable happened. And yeah, we ended up in a relationship. And I moved into her place, and time passed. And I kind of went on from farming and all that stuff, more into machines and civil engineering and all that stuff. Again, driving more diggers and trucks. And look at these pictures again. They transport me back to those moments in time. That picture and the digger, it was actually a Saturday morning and we were digging out gravel from somewhere and we were actually selling it to a nursery up the road. We weren't supposed to be doing it, but we were earning a little bit of extra money on a Saturday morning, unbeknownst to the boss. None of you are related to the Trant family. The other one on the right, up in Reading, driving this little digger. Time passed, I had this good job. It was very, very well paid. For the time, it was extraordinarily well paid. And I found myself with this secure, well-paid job. Had a nice place to live, living with Kate. Had this great relationship, and I had a whole shed full of motorbikes. What else could anyone want? And it was around about this time that my brother and I were walking down the high street in Southampton. And we walked past a camera shop. Remember the days when camera shops used to exist? Now it's nearly all online. I don't know about New Zealand, but certainly in the UK, they're a rare beast to see a high street shop with cameras in it, a proper shop with people who are actually into photography behind the counter, who know what they're talking about, as opposed to some poor kid who's just got a sales target to meet and doesn't really know what on earth he's talking about at all. My brother had been bought a camera outfit. It was a Minolta, and he'd started to get into photography. His girlfriend had bought him this as a Christmas present. And as we kind of looked in this shop window, he said, "Oh, that's a bargain." He said, "You've got tons of money. You should buy that." And I bought this Minolta X700, and I think there was a kit of 3 lenses with it and bits and pieces. It was secondhand, it was used. But I started playing around with it and became interested in photography. Who amongst you guys kind of like remembers that moment when you first got a camera? You'd be off out walking in the woods. Anybody there remember doing things like that? Good. I'm not alone after all. But yeah, I'd get up at sunrise, go walking in the forest, looking for pictures, searching for pictures. And I was so excited when I got a good one. It was just the most rewarding, brilliant feeling. I haven't got any of those old photos anymore. Goodness knows what's happened to them. But over time, I've lost them. And it's a big loss because each one of those would have a memory attached to it. Like, oh, I remember that morning. I went out to photograph this, you know, trying to do motion blur with trains going over the bridge and seeing how that would work. I remember those things, but I've lost the photograph, and it is such a shame. But I go out walking, take the camera out. I can remember there was where I live, it's near the coast, and there's an island off the coast called the Isle of Wight. And there was a massive thunderstorm going on. And I was down there trying to sort of see if I could capture the feeling of this thunderstorm. And I didn't understand about photographing lightning, you know, leaving the shutter open with a you know, small aperture, long, slow exposure, and maybe you'll catch a lightning strike within there. But I was down there and I was playing around, and I caught this picture of lightning over the Isle of Wight. And the light was fantastic. Even though back then I didn't really understand about light and its qualities and just how important they are, all I knew was this scene looked amazing. Now with hindsight, I know that it was the qualities of light that were making it amazing. I shot a whole roll of 36. I took these photographs off to the local mini lab or chemist or whatever and dropped the film off. And when I got the pictures back, I was so disappointed. Has anyone else done that? Yep. I was absolutely distraught. I thought, but it looks so great. What have I done wrong? How have I completely messed this up? And I so wish I had some of those wrong photographs. But I was so pissed off. I genuinely threw the whole lot away. The negatives, the prints, the whole lot. And I thought, I'm doing something dreadfully wrong. That was a pointless waste of time. I was so disappointed. And it wasn't until many years later I got to learn that the person who printed your pictures and developed your film, they had final control over what your images look like. I didn't know that back then. I just thought I'd done something wrong. I didn't know that the person operating the mini lab was the person in control. And if you got someone who was good at it, who had an interest in it working that day, you got great prints back, assuming you know, exposed correctly and all that. But if you had some poor kid who's got a hangover from the night before being paid the minimum wage and they just chuck the machine on auto, who knows what you're going to get back? But I didn't know it then. And I nearly gave up on photography. But I digress slightly. So I had a secure, well-paid job. I had my hobby photography, and despite that low point, and this is why I wish I still had those pictures, because I could then look at those pictures. I could scan them in, put them into my time travel album and look back on that moment and go, yeah, I remember that, standing on that cliff top, remember the wind blowing and how great it was. And I was in this little shelter on the cliff top, and how disappointed I was at that time, and what a great learning lesson it was, because it's moments like that where we learn the most. I had my hobby, I had a well-paid job, I had a nice place to live, I had this really close, great relationship with Kate, and a shed full of motorbikes. So why was I unhappy? I thought there was something wrong with me. I've got everything everybody wants in life, yet I am unhappy. What is the matter with me? One day I was at a friend's workshop, used to fix and respray cars and things like that. And I was grizzling and complaining about any little thing I could possibly imagine to think of and complain about. And of course, when we're grizzling and complaining, we're not usually grizzling and complaining about the thing we're actually complaining about. We're really pissed off about something else in the background. But I was having a gripe and a go, and Gary is one of those brilliant friends who doesn't say what you want to hear. He says what you need to hear. And he just said, for goodness sake, stop grizzling. And if life's so bad, screw it all into a ball, chuck it in the bin and start again. Now, I'd always wanted to travel. I'd always wanted to see those places in National Geographic. And so I did what he said. I sold all my belongings. Literally anything that wouldn't fit in a rucksack. The only motorcycle I kept was that orange Harley Davidson, which you can see parked in our kitchen at that moment because it was a rainy day and I was cleaning and polishing it. I kept that because it was worth a bit of money, and I thought, that is my little thing. I'm going to hide that somewhere. I sold all the rest of my belongings. I ended that relationship, which broke both our hearts. And I bought a one-way ticket to the other side of the world to see what would happen. Now, the question, of course, is, well, why did you end that relationship? If things were so compatible, why didn't you go together? I don't know if you noticed in that picture, Kate is sitting in a wheelchair. She fell off a pony when she was 13 years old and broke her back and ended up paraplegic. She is a brilliant person. She used to come out on the back of my motorbike. We'd sit her on the back and sellotape her feet to the foot pegs so they didn't fall off. And we'd go off motorcycling, and you know, there'd be a bunch of us together. We'd end up at a pub somewhere, and then of course we'd all be going like, right, who's carrying her inside? You know, because there was no wheelchair. Kate would have loved to have gone traveling, but she couldn't do the things I wanted to do. And I had to make probably the hardest choice of my life. Do I live my life or her life? And I chose mine. And I hated myself for a very long time after making that decision, because just looking at this picture, it still takes me back to the look on her face the day that I left. Photographs have this incredible power to transport us. And I just think it's an incredible thing. I bought this one-way ticket to the other side of the world, and I left my life behind, including Kate, feeling guilty, miserable, worthless. I'd left the little cripple girl. What a bastard. Who could do such a thing? I washed up in Australia. I had some friends there. I'd been there briefly before. And I went to lean on a friend who was in Australia, only to discover he was in pretty much the same place as me psychologically. So that was a disaster waiting to happen. One night I met a girl in a bar. She was working behind the bar. We got on really well, and we sort of like hung out together a bit. And one night, round at her place, you know, so do you do this in New Zealand? But Australians after the pub, they say, does anyone want to come back to my place for a port? Do you do that? Or are you Kiwis too sensible? No? Sorry?
Apparently we do.
You do? Oh, well, you're not as sensible as I thought. But it was quite a good thing. Yeah, come back and have a glass, come back and have a port. We're chatting away, and she told me that she'd been born in Africa. So I always wanted to go to Africa. And a silly late night conversation, let's go to Africa. And I never imagined for a moment that 5 weeks later, she did much to say she sold everything. She got rid of her house and we washed up in Africa. And we journeyed through. Sharon is the one in the, oh, you can't see me pointing. Sharon is the one, you see the middle photograph, the old Land Rover, and then there's a bunch, this is a guy in a red shirt, and to his right, wearing like a white dress with her arm in front, grinning, that's Sharon. That's the girl that I met. We arrived in Nairobi, and we hitchhiked and bussed from Nairobi down to Cape Town. And there were many adventures along the way. And again, all of these photographs, they're tremendously evocative of that time. The one on the left, oh, you can't see my webcam, can you? Ah, right. I'm going to have to describe it. I've still got that red hat. I'm holding it up for you in my hand right now. It's very worn and beaten up. I bought that at Kubra hat in Australia in Fremantle markets. They had all the macho brown ones and black ones and blue ones. And there was these two red ones. And I thought, I've got to do it. I like to be controversial. But there I am at Centre House in Tanzania there was this place, it was run by nuns, and they would take in backpackers and travelers to earn a little bit of revenue to keep the place going. That is Sister Sophia. She was the head nun who looked after the place. Now, Sharon and I were stood outside there discussing the way forward. Where do we go from here? Do we take the bus? Do we hitchhike? Do we go with these guys we've met who got this Land Cruiser? And we were disagreeing. It wasn't a fight, it was a disagreement. Sister Sophia came round the corner and I looked at her and just jokingly, I said, "Sister, what is it with you women? All the time you have to argue." And with a dead straight face, she looked at me and she said, "What you need is a big stick. Beat the lady." Of course, you can imagine Sharon's reaction. Now, of course, Sister Sophia didn't mean that. It's just like, that is probably what would happen in many of the cultures in the region within which she lived. That is the sort of thing she was dealing with and taking in, you know, women who've been beaten by their husbands because they disagreed. But nonetheless, the look on Sharon's face, having just been told she should be beaten by a nun, was priceless. And I so wish we had phones back then, because that would have been a wonderful magic moment to capture and to remember. We didn't do a selfie, but I did hand the camera, which I had, a little compact Canon film camera, to Sharon and said, "You've got to take a picture of me with Sister Sophia." So it's the closest thing we had to a selfie. The group shot where we're stood with the old Land Cruiser crossing into Malawi. We're in Malawi at that time. President Banda, he did not like backpackers and hippies and long hair. We'd been to a market, and I can remember the smell of this market, and we'd found clothing to make ourselves look smarter and go off into Malawi so that we wouldn't be turned away at the border. And it's me being an idiot and standing here with my chest out being all imperialist and all that stuff. And the guys who were fixing our Land Cruiser, because we had a broken spring on the front, they're just looking at us like, what are these idiots doing? And it's one of those magical moments. And again, it transports me. The one below, sitting on the bonnet of that old car, Sharon had gone back to Australia after several months. And I carried on, bought this old VW Passat station wagon. And I drove that old car 38,000 kilometers around southern Africa in a huge, great big loop. There I am in the Chimanimani Mountains on the border of Mozambique. I set the self-timer and put the camera down there, looking all windswept and interesting, sitting on the bonnet, completely on my own. But all those things are evocative for that picture. And in this talk, I have to manage myself, by the way, so that I don't bore you to death. And I hope I'm not doing that by just going through my memories. The one on the right with a black mamba snake, which I'd found lying in the road. Luckily, it was dead. And I was traveling with an Australian guy called Kevin Travascus, who was a chef. And I got him to take that photograph. It's an amazing world we live in these days, in the world of mobile phones, where we can record these moments, which of course we couldn't do back then. There are so many poignant times which are missing. I was staying in a house near Cape Town with this wonderful family. This man was a kind of a friend, a colleague. He had worked with Sharon, the Australian girl's father, in the past. And Sharon's father had said, I'll tell Ken that you're likely to show up somewhere in Africa and you may arrive. And we'd arrived at this address, which we'd been given. He hadn't been told. Nonetheless, he'd said, oh, well, little Sharon Thorpe that I haven't seen since you were like 2 or something. And he took us into his home. It's a beautiful home. He'd done very well for himself in life. He's a lovely, kind man. With his family, we kind of stayed the night and then 2 and then more. And one night, sitting out on the stoop, as they call it in South Africa, in the back garden, eating dinner, and I think Ken's got a bowl of rice pudding there. He looked at me and he said, what are you going to do with the rest of your life when all this traveling is over? I said, I don't know, I don't really want to think about it. He said, yeah, okay, well, actually, he blackmailed me. He said, well, you're living in my home and you're sitting in my chair, eating my food, and you have been for weeks. He said, you're not going to get out of my chair until you tell me what you're going to do with the rest of your life. Tough question. And it was squirmy. It was uncomfortable. And this picture brings back that feeling of discomfort, but also total joy, because eventually, kicking and screaming, he dragged it out of me that maybe I'd like to turn my hobby, photography, into a living, because it would give me access to things I wouldn't normally get to see, to travel to places I would not normally travel to, and to meet people I would not normally meet. And he just looked at me over that bowl of rice pudding and he said, well, go and do it then, you idiot. I said, I can't do that, Ken. I'm an out-of-work digger driver. I've messed up my life. I'm the woman I love, and all that story that we all carry around in our minds. I can't do that. I'm an out-of-work digger driver. And he looked at me and he just said, everyone in the world thinks they're a shopkeeper, a postman, a digger driver. So they don't even try to fulfill their goals, dreams, and ambitions. So if you try, you've got a head start over 99% of the population of this planet. And it was like being slapped around the face with a wet haddock. It was a total eureka moment. And I just thought, he's right. And I remember going into my bedroom in his house and getting out the map and thinking, what do I want to do? I'm here, right, Sharon's going back to Australia. Where do I want to go? I want to do this, that, and the other, and the rest of it. And I'd figured it out, right, I need another 3 months to do this. I went into Cape Town the next day and I booked a return flight to the UK. Why? I didn't necessarily intend to come back to the UK. When I left, I sold everything. There was a lot of painful memory in the UK. But I decided to go back to the UK purely because I know how it works. My hobby was photography, but it was in control of me rather than the other way around. Does anyone in your society feel that way yourselves? Big silence, okay. So I'm guessing you're all quite advanced photographers. Sorry, I didn't hear that. All right. So I would suggest in that case, respectfully, that the photography is in control of you rather than you are in control of the photography. So like, it was that thing I mentioned earlier about being delighted when I got a good one, but it didn't happen very often. And I didn't quite know how I'd done it, which is why I returned to the UK. I know how it works here. I know the system. I can figure out how I'm going to retrain and become a photographer. And there I am. So remember, I've come back to the UK. I got nothing. I got no money, really. I had that Harley, which I sold because I needed to buy cameras and I needed some money to get myself set up. Looked at options, university and all that sort of thing. In the end, I signed on to unemployment benefits and I told them my plan. I told them what I wanted to do. I said, am I allowed to do this? Don't want any trouble. And they said, yeah, you can. I found this old caravan in a field behind a farm. and it was all grown in and covered in brambles and overgrowth. And I went and saw the farmer and said, "Can I live there?" And he said, "You must be nuts." He said, "But yeah, if you want to clear it up." And he let me have it for 3 months for tidying the place up. That was the first winter, and the snow's falling, and it wasn't that warm in there. But I learned photography by cocooning myself in that caravan for a year. And all I did was practice, 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 get it wrong, and practice some more for a year. Through unemployment services, they said I could go to night school, and I went to a City and Guilds basic photography night school. And then I would take what I learned, and then I go and practice and practice and practice. Now, bear in mind, back then I was on £40 a week income support, and 36 clicks of the camera cost around £10 for the film and the developing and the printing. That makes one very selective about what you're going to go click on, and to think very, very hard about what the photograph you're going to make is. And I say make because we don't take photographs, we make them. Cameras don't take pictures, we make pictures using a camera, which is a very different thing. They allowed me to do some charity work which paid costs, and the costs were quite generous actually, and they actually helped to pay for the film. So I'd practice and practice. I'd try taking photographs of things. I'd read books. They gave me a student card because of the night school course. So I'd go to Bournemouth University where I could use their library and their resources. I spent a whole year just practicing. I phoned up professional photographers in the area and just told them what I was doing and said, "Can I come and hang out? I just want to be in that environment. Have you got any odd jobs you want me to do? You don't have to pay me. I just want to be in that environment." And slowly, 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 it began to improve. I started to understand how things worked, not just shutter aperture. I was about to say ISO, but of course in those days we didn't have ISO apart from the film stock that we bought. I mean, you think about it, the cameras we had are the most primitive basic of cameras. We had a shutter, we had an aperture, and we had a focus ring. That was about all we had on a camera. And yet, if you look at photographs that move, touch, and inspire you, taken on cameras of that type, you've got to think, how did they do that? With our modern whiz-bang digital cameras that will do everything, and they add more features and add more gadgets. Why aren't we blowing those old-time photographers into the weeds? That, for me, is proof positive that your camera doesn't take pictures. The camera does not matter, but I'll come back to that. I got picked up by a guy called Billy Passotti. Again, there are so few photo records, and this is why I'm so passionate about using phones or whatever method to store pictures. Billy, he took me under his wing, Park Photographics. They could have did weddings and portraits and a little bit of commercial stuff. He wasn't the most creative of photographers, but he was a lovely guy. And he took me under his wing and started showing me how things work. They had their own in-house laboratory. And I was telling the guy who did the printing, he was a wonderful photographic printer, wonderful. I was telling him about the thunderstorm over the Isle of Wight and how I'd thrown the negatives and the prints away because I was so disheartened. He said, "That's a shame." He said, "Because if you brought them to me, I could probably make them look fantastic." And that's when I learned the person who is in control of how your images look is the person who develops the pictures. And it is exactly the same today. There's nothing wrong with shooting JPEG at all. Please don't think I'm a raw file maximalist. I am not. However, when you develop your own raw files and do a bit of post-production, it is you who is in control of how those photographs look. When the camera does it and produces a JPEG, it's the camera that's in control. The camera has a pre-programmed algorithm, and basically you take the picture, it takes the raw file, it looks at the raw file, makes its best guess as to what the picture should look like, and passes it on to you as a JPEG. The raw file is the negative, and if you print your own negative, as in post-production, you can make it look the way you remember the scene. So there's a good chance that had I taken my thunderstorm over the Isle of Wight and shot just a JPEG, it might have looked really boring and miserable compared to the real thing, because the poor camera, it can't think. It doesn't know how to create the picture. It doesn't know what was there. It can only go on what its manufacturers have told it. That was a big learning curve. And that is how long it took. It took me so long to understand this, because we're talking a year after that event. Billy died, sadly. And sometimes life has blessings and curses, doesn't it? He was the most wonderful guy. He was like my surrogate father. He died suddenly and unexpectedly, just at the time when I was noticing I was being absorbed into his business, and I didn't want to be absorbed into his business. I wanted to travel. I wanted to meet interesting people. The truth be told, I wanted to be National Geographic featured. And he solved the problem for me in the most terrible way. I took to the streets and started talking to people about what I was doing and did they have any work. And I slowly built a little portfolio of images. I've still, oh, you can't see, I've got a webcam. I've got a portfolio of images, which is here on my desk. I used to carry around with me and go to different places and leave cards and sort of intimate that I was really busy, and that's why I didn't advertise. The truth, of course, was I had no money. I couldn't afford to advertise. And, you know, slowly, I got a few little jobs come in a bit at a time, photographing for hotels and country clubs. Hampshire magazine, it was a local magazine. I went and saw the editor, and we just got on well. I couldn't believe it. That was my first magazine cover. It was the high street in the town where I used to live one Christmas, the Blue Hour thing. I remember shooting it on an old, what was it, a 6x6 medium format Bronica square format camera. Excuse me, I have a swig of tea. And standing in the street with a tripod, and it was an old mechanical Bronica camera, not an electronic one. It was the ones that Park Photographics, my old mentor Billy, they'd upgraded to newer electric cameras, and he let me have the old mechanical ones for next to nothing. Used that to my advantage. Went to there's a big fuel refinery not far from where I lived at that time, and went to them and said, you know, do you want me to do any photography? Oh, we've got a photographer with you. Said, okay, well, you have these fire risk things. You're not allowed on site with an electric watch. You're not allowed on site with a radio or anything like that. Nothing electronic is allowed within the walls of the refinery. Just double check, are his cameras mechanical or are they electronic? Oh, we hadn't thought of that. And I managed to blag my way in and do some of that. I don't have any of those images to show you because he wouldn't let me show people pictures, so whatever. But slowly, over time, I grew this portfolio and started taking pictures. There was a lot of walking around industrial estates with this old portfolio tucked under my arm, just knocking on doors. Employment services, I was still getting benefits, and I declare any earnings so that I didn't get in trouble, and I don't want to defraud the system. But they had this brilliant thing. You could go and use their resources to try and find a job. So I'd go and sit there with the yellow pages, looking through all the different companies. I just sit there for the afternoon, cold calling, picking up the phone, calling, hi, can I come and see you? It'd be really great. The holiday park on the end. Okay, I'm a show off, I'm loud. I know that, not everybody is. We all have to find our own path, our own winning formula that helps. The one on the right, Holborn, the tourist park. You know, literally I was in there at it was a networking meeting or something, and had these most terrible pictures of their park all around the thing. And I went over to the desk and just said, can I see the manager, please? And I basically said, your pictures are appalling. You need a better photographer. And he said, and you are that photographer? I said, I do believe so. And he said, you better come in then. You know, you never know what will happen. What's the worst that could happen? The guy would say, oh, you big-headed tosser, clear off, get out. You know, so what? It worked. Much to my amazement, I did a little photo shoot for a band. They wanted a cover. It was very naive, you know, this album by a band called the Moneymakers, and the album was called Throwing Stones at the Puppets. I came up with this idea for an album cover, the little boy looking through a hole in a stone. and the yuppie with the suit and the laptop in the background, and then on the back cover you can't see it terribly well in this maybe, but you've just got the guy's arm and the suit sleeve and the laptop with the stone line on it. Much to my amazement, somebody happened to, they never notified me, but a friend said, did you know you've just got best CD cover design awarded by, it was the local paper, it wasn't the small local paper, it was the county paper. I'm like, wow. I started collecting these things together and then realized that I wasn't advertising because I couldn't afford it, but also what's the downside of advertising? Anyone with some money can buy an advert. But this appearing in a newspaper made me think, but if a newspaper writes something about you, everyone knows that they're telling you a story. Someone is in agreement with you rather than you just going, hello, look at me, I can do this, call this number. So I became a complete part for some PR. I started entering awards and competitions just so that if I won something, I could go to the newspaper and say, hey, look what I've won. Hey, look what I've won. Look what I've done. And I managed to get into a few of these things. The one on the top right, Mike's World Famous, that was an interesting one. A phone call one day from Australia. And this guy sort of said, hello, I wondered if you'd like to photograph our wedding. I love photographing weddings. I still do. And I photographed loads in the old days. It's pure storytelling. And that's what I most love with a camera. Could you photograph our wedding? I said, yeah. I chatted about the dates and he told me where it was. And yeah, that all sounds good. I said, so, where do you live at the moment? And he said, we're in Australia. How the hell did you find me from the other side of the world? And he said, I don't know. He said, somebody gave me this card and I just thought I'd give you a call. And by chance, you happen to be in the same town. And, miracles and magic do happen in this incredible world. So I became a tart for PR. Billy really had taught me with weddings. But wedding photography in those days was pretty much lining people up in a churchyard with a medium format camera, nice bit of light, nice bit of scenery, and you would take the same picture over and over again with different people in it. It wasn't that creative. Do any of you, I know this is a faff when I try and interact with you, but hey, do any of you guys remember that stuff, the old wedding photos, the lines of people? There's a yes going around. Oh, thanks, guys. It'd be much, I can't even see you. It would be so good. I could just go, hey, wave your hand. Doesn't matter, the wonders of tech. So thank you, Jane. Yeah, it was all this kind of rather boring stuff, but I learned a lot of technical things through it. What I really wanted to do was to try my hand at reportage, documentary style wedding photographs. Because of Park Photographic, week after week after week, people were coming along saying, we want something different, we want something new. And nobody would do it because of fear. They would say things like, well, the thing is, we don't know what you'll get. They wanted to micromanage everything. Excuse me. And one day this couple came along and they said, no, we really don't want any of that stuff. We want something relaxed. We want it just to be a story of the day. And I'd said, I don't know what will happen. I don't know how it will work, but I'm up for giving it a go. I'm not going to charge you the full whack. If you just pay for the film and the processing, I'll do it and let's see what happens. And it was great. It was one of the best things I've ever done. They loved it. I enjoyed it instead of being kind of bored by it. I don't have the pictures from that scanned in. I don't even know where they are now. We're going back a long way in time. But one of the photographs was a picture of the groom and the best man. And I was lying on the ground looking up with a fill-in flash on the camera. And I got them all to stand in a circle around me and hold the orders of services out to the camera. So it's like a scrum shot. I took this picture and it won a Master Photographers Association award. I've actually got it in that portfolio, but I've got it digitally. it won a Master Photographers Association award. So of course, me being me, I then started, you know, being a tart and putting it out to the local press. But I also entered it into the Fuji Wedding Awards. Not sure what would happen, because in those days everything was all, you know, the hand on cheek, gazing lovingly, holding the hand, and there is a place for some of that. Much to my amazement, it won a National Fuji Wedding Award, and it ended up on the cover of their Fuji Ultimate Guide to Wedding Photography. And I ended up getting tons and tons of wedding clients. And every single one of these pictures is a memory of their wedding. And it's an extraordinary thing, because I've got a terrible memory. Yet I can remember all of these people and all of these moments and what was going on and who was there. The one on the top right, I particularly remember. It's actually a friend of mine and his daughter. That's Dad, just about to go up the aisle, and they're all nervy. But I just noticed the light and the fabric of her dress and the way her hand just went around his arm. This is the key with photography, is learning to see. It's not learning shutters and apertures and ISOs. Okay, you've got to learn that. Of course, you've got to learn that. You can't drive to the shops until you've learned how to drive the car, what the controls do. But the art of driving is in being aware of seeing. You drive to the shops without even thinking about it. I bet there are times when you drive home from something, you think, oh, I don't remember going past there, and say, oh, never mind. You're talking about the holiday you're going to have and all the rest of it. And this is how photography works. Until you've got shutter, aperture, ISO, camera controls, light and composition, that is the start of your journey. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. But in seeing the light on this girl's dress and the arm, I just remember how nervous they were. The little kid poking the guy on the nose. Every single moment here is a memory for me and who these people were. But what of the traveling? I wanted to go and travel, and I was getting caught up in photographing events of places, of photographing weddings. One day, I was trying to get rid of some old clothes. Now, when I got old clothes and they're worn out, the charity shop doesn't want them because, trust me, they're pretty worn out. At the time, there was a refugee crisis going on in Turkey, and I thought, well, they might keep some poor soul who's shivering to death on a hillside warm. I was trying to figure a way to get these clothes over to help somebody. I never actually figured that one, but that path led me to a chance meeting with someone who was involved with a charity working in Romania. This was around 2000 when the Romanian Revolution had happened, and all these abandoned children were found in these institutions after the fall of Ceausescu. And there was certainly in the UK the most terrible, terrible press about Romanians. This person who was working at it had said, yeah, but there's also some good stories. There's some amazing stories. What we'd love you to do is to come and tell some of the good stories, some of the good work that's being done in Romania by Romanians, not just aid organizations. And I went out there and I said, if you can pay for me to get there, I'll go. It was the first chance to go on a journey, to go and have an adventure and to tell a story. And this is where the photographs started to get really poignant for me. There were some wonderful places. Bottom right-hand corner was in one of these orphanages, as they were called. The kids weren't true orphans. It was because Ceausescu had wanted to create the Romanian Workers' Army, and he was encouraging everyone to have as many babies as possible. Now, if you couldn't afford to keep all those babies, the state would house, feed, and educate those children for you in these institutions. Many of these kids would go home at the weekend. The parents would come and visit them. But with the fall of the Ceausescu regime, there was no money. The system totally collapsed. There was no food, there was no hygiene, and all these dreadful scenes that we certainly saw up here in the newspapers of these abandoned children, filthy, stinking, rocking in these cots. It was heartbreaking. Bottom right corner was in one of these, not one of those institutions, but in a Romanian-run place where they were looking after these kids and helping them get back on their feet. I'm stood at the top of the stairwell, and that little girl came up the stairs. And she just saw me leaning over the top and she just started laughing and smiling. And I just grabbed the camera, got that great light coming in through the window, and just leant over the top, framed the composition because I felt like she's been on a journey, and just click, grab that moment in time, which goes back, of course, you know, it's record keeping, it's grabbing a moment in time, all those things that you guys said. But whilst there, I got totally sidetracked and drawn in by the street people, people living outside of the system. There were pros and cons to both sides. They had freedom when they lived outside the system, but they had warmth and clothing and cleanliness when they lived inside the system, but they had to follow the rules. Many of them didn't like that. The photograph on the left of the guy standing up and everyone else sitting on the ground with tablecloth with food on it. These guys were living in a sewer next to the railway station in the middle of the city of Arad. And I was fascinated by them and said to our guide, is there any chance I could get some photographs of those people? You know, do you think it would be okay? And he said, yeah, I'm sure. And he went over and started talking to them. And they're all noisy and they're milling around me. And they're pulling and tugging and shouting and all that stuff. And I started to get really frightened. I thought, God, these guys are just going to beat me up and steal the cameras. My fixer guide said, okay, yeah, they're completely cool with that, but they'd like something in return. How about bring them some food? And we went across the street to a shop and bought bread and sausages and whatever, tomatoes. Brought it back to them. And one of these people in that photograph, she went down into this hole in the ground and she came out with this filthy old plastic tablecloth. She let it on the grass next to 6 lanes of traffic in the middle of Arad, and they all quietened down and they knelt on the grass, and Danny White-Eye, the guy in the blue shirt, stood up and he said, Grace. And in that moment, those people were transformed from cutthroats and robbers into just wonderful people who had nothing. And it deeply, deeply affected me, and it does to this day. When I realize the judgments that we make about people, just looking at them and their appearances, are so often incorrect and based on our own experiences. And I believe photography is a journey to try and help change that perception and the telling of these stories, which anyone can do. The little boy and the little girl in the middle picture, they're a brother and sister. Look at them, filthy, dirty, but just look how loving they are. Look at the happiness in their eyes. And it's a story which no one tells. The one top right, the child with the umbrella. I thought it was a little boy. One day I got fascinated by these people. I spent so much time with them. One day I was with them and I felt this tug on the back of my shirt, and this little child was pulling on my shirt and holding up my wallet, which I had dropped. I had no idea, you know, and my own prejudgments were so wrong. I now know, because of subsequent returns and visits, that little boy with the umbrella is actually a little girl, and that little girl was disguised as a little boy by the mother because there was a paedophile within the group who was pimping out children. And she wanted to hide the fact that she had a daughter to try and protect her. And it was a heartbreaking story, and I could go on forever, and I have many other things around it. But she disguised her daughter as a boy to try and protect her. And eventually she had to give that child to an aid organization to be protected when it became obvious she was no longer a boy. And this was the thing which inspired me. This was the journey. This is where it was all leading to, because life is this amazing journey. Now, I came back with the films, and I'd been sponsored by Fuji with the film just by luck, because I'd won that particular Fuji Wedding Award. In those days, Fuji had area reps in different places. She said, oh yeah, we'll sponsor you with some film. The professional laboratory that I use to do my developing and printing, Phil said, well, I'll develop the films for you. And he made contact sheets, which I think I've got them here. The contact sheets, and he looked at the pictures and said, these are fantastic. He said, this should be an exhibition. Oh, I don't know how to make an exhibition. I've never done it before. But he got the sponsorship through Fuji. Fuji sponsored creating the exhibition. Somebody else said, that's a really great idea. They sponsored the framing. And I'm thinking, what the hell do I do with these photographs? Where do I exhibit them? How do I exhibit them? I spoke to some local hotels and said, can we do some things? Can we put it up? Can we do this, that, and the other? I suddenly thought of a television presenter we have here in the UK who's very involved with child protection, and asked her if she'd come. She didn't. But tried all these things. And one day I was talking to a friend who's done very well for himself and said, you know, I don't quite know where to begin or how to do this. He said, well, have you asked the Royal Photographic Society? I said, no. He said, why not? I believe you're a member. I said, well, I am a basic member, but you know. And I was playing small. I phoned the Royal Photographic Society and said, hello, is there any chance I could use your Octagon galleries at your world headquarters in Bath for this exhibition? They said, yeah, sure, when do you want it? It's that easy. And I had should, but, would, no, they're not interested, myself out of it. It was my own story where I was, without realizing it, self-sabotaging. Wow, I've got the Octagon gallery. Now what am I going to do to try and get people to come and see it? And I again was talking to my friend Richard, and he said, have you invited the Romanian ambassador? I said, no, he's busy. He's you know, he's got other things to think about besides, you know, abandoned children, Romania at that time, very dodgy subject. They were getting so much bad press. And Richard's response to that was, you don't know, you haven't asked. When are you going to do it? So I phoned the Romanian embassy, and I got to speak to this lady called Ramona Mitrica, who was the cultural attache. And she said, that sounds really interesting. She said, yeah, maybe we'll come. And this went on for some time as I was inviting different people. I got, you know, the Fuji were coming to the private view and others, and you know. Ramona Mitrica kept saying, maybe, 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 maybe. I'd been down to the gallery and we'd hung the pictures on the wall. And I managed to blag my way onto BBC Radio to try and talk about it. It was literally, I just said, I'm doing this exhibition. It's at the world headquarters of the RPS, you know, and, you know, trying to pick it up. And they said, yeah, come on, we're doing this show. And, you know, come and tell us, let's have a talk. And I was at the radio station. I suddenly had this idea. This is the day before the live view. And I said, can I use a phone, please? No mobile phones in those days. Can I use a phone? You're going on air? Yeah, I know. I'll only be a minute. They gave me a phone, and I phoned Ramona Mitrica, the cultural attaché at the Romanian embassy, and just said, I'm at the RPA, I'm at the BBC. They're about to interview me about the exhibition. I would love to say that you are coming. Can I do that? And she said yes, which was a big, big moment. And it was euphoria. Wow, that's amazing. Instantly followed by the crash. Oh my God, what have I done? What if they hate it? In this photograph, I'm with the lady from the charity who initially invited me to go, and Ramona Mitrica, the cultural attaché of the Romanian embassy. Look at my hair. Looks like I've been out in the rain, doesn't it? I sweat. I was terrified that she would arrive and get angry, be upset, whatever. But a little piece of magic happened. Ramona looked at maybe just 4 or 5 pictures. She was going around the exhibition the wrong way. I wanted to say, you're going the wrong way. She looked at about 4 pictures, and she came and she said, no one's ever done this before. I said, done what? She said, you have portrayed these people as human beings, not objects of pity. And I want this exhibition on at the Romanian embassy. And I got invited to the embassy, and then we went to several events because she said you need to get used to protocols, and that's me with the ambassador of Romania and the chairman of the Master Photographers Association with the exhibition there. I got to do the speech on the marble stairs to his guests and talk about stuff. And it was an amazing event. It was an amazing moment and an amazing journey. So how could I get to travel more? How could I get to see more of this beautiful, wonderful world? The interweb was appearing. And these things called ebooks had started to arrive. But well, I wonder if I could do an ebook about photography and see if I could sell it online, and then maybe that would provide some income. So I could go and do more of this stuff without having to rely on the money from doing it, because people want you to do these things endlessly, but very few have the budget or the inclination to pay someone to do it. So with the help of my then partner, who very smart lady, television producer, very high level television producer. She took my disarrayed thinking and put it into some kind of order. We wrote the one on the left, the first one, Digital Photography Exposed, and we did a mini one called Lenses Exposed, just talking about lenses and focal lengths and how you can use them. And then, of course, the thing which I've done so much of, and which actually I'm quite passionate about, and that's wedding photography. And I'm passionate about it because most photographers forget it is not their photo shoot. It is a milestone event in someone's day, and you've got to deliver no matter what happens, and there's only one chance, and you can't get it wrong. We wrote these ebooks, and it started to generate some revenue. Much to my surprise, people started buying them. They started buying quite a lot of them. It was the early days. And wow, this is pretty amazing. And the business was starting to go to strength. We combined our forces, Jane and I, as a TV producer, a very, very good TV producer, and as a gobby show-off loudmouth like myself, I'm good at that. We thought, well, why don't we create a business where we make videos about photography? Stuff that will teach people things. Jane mentioned my YouTube channel. In its original form, we had a subscription. This is that old website. People paid money per month, don't remember how much, to get access to a back catalogue of videos on various different subjects about photography, training videos. And each month I would add more. We would add more. And slowly over time, it started to grow, but it didn't grow much. And it reached a point where it just wouldn't go beyond, and it wasn't covering the costs. But also there was something deep going on in the background. Our relationship was falling apart. It had become quite painful, quite toxic. And this was another crash moment in life, just like leaving Kate. I thought I was going nuts. For whatever reason, which I'm not going to go into, because there are two sides to every story, and she is not here to tell her side. She was counter saying everything that I did. And I thought I was getting early onset Alzheimer's, just like both of my parents had. And it scared the hell out of me, and it still does. I thought I was going nuts. The business was spiraling downward by this point in time. It was like people who think, let's have a baby to save the marriage. We started a business. Big mistake, big mistake. Despite in those early videos, I think my presenting was better, but it was all an act to hide this black hole inside of me. I gained weight, tons of weight. I became extremely obese because I'm trying to fill an emotional hole with food instead of figuring out what fits it. That I was trying to put a square peg in a round hole. I was terribly depressed, even to the point of thinking, if I've got early onset dementia, if I end up like my father, who was very angry and unhappy, I'd rather not be here. I can't say I was considering suicide, but those thoughts were going through my mind. Eventually, by a convoluted journey, I thought this relationship has to end. It was great, but something changed, and I've got to move on. And it took a lot of courage to end it, because all those things from the past with Kate were coming back. Are you going to do this again? Are you making another big mistake? Are you the one who's at fault here? All those questions. Eventually I did, and I felt terrible. And I thought the business will obviously collapse. We've got no chance of running it now if we split up. When I borrowed money from the bank as well. A very good friend of mine said, how much revenue do you get from YouTube? Because we had just a handful of videos on YouTube, and they were there purely as little tasters to get people interested. And he worked out that if I put all of the catalogue of videos onto YouTube, the YouTube money should just about cover the bank repayments. I'd go and get a job. Put those things out onto YouTube. And I was terribly frightened. My confidence was at a terrible low. And I thought people were going to say, oh, you fat idiot, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'd be trolled and all the rest of it. But the complete opposite happened. Much to my amazement, people were leaving comments saying, I've struggled with that for ages, for years, and you've just explained it in a 20-minute video. This is incredible. And a new way became apparent of making photography videos and putting them onto YouTube, of creating workshops and trips to other countries where I could teach people about photography when they got some amazing, fantastic material to work with like-minded people who are all there because of a common thread, their love and passion of photography, but also they kind of like the way that I do things, because if they didn't, they think, I can't stand that bloke, I'm not going, you know? So it would bring common people together. We could travel, we could do things. And in each of these videos, I can just promote them. And that kind of grew and grew and grew. And the YouTube channel grew with many, many followers and subscribers. And it was down to those wonderful, kind comments from complete strangers. That's what gave me back my confidence. Because trust me, it was missing. Along the way, I was contacted by a company in Switzerland, in Basel. I haven't done it recently. I had a 2-day workshop in Zurich in Switzerland. And it was on the website, and this company called me, the head of PR, and just said, would your workshop help me? I don't know anything about photography, but I have to create photographs to go with press releases. This company create private jets. They take your aircraft, strip out the interior, put in the swimming pool and the bedroom and all this stuff. You know, would your course help me take better pictures? Because when we have, you know, the world's wealthiest people coming through our doors, we like to take a quick photograph without being, you know. And I said, no, that workshop won't work. But they did hire me for 2 days, private training. We got on like a house on fire, and it was a great experience. When sometime later they said to me, would you be interested in coming back? The story was, one of our clients has bought a brand new Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which is made of carbon fiber. And the industry as a whole say you cannot convert that. You cannot change the interior because there is no aluminium superstructure to attach the new interior to. We figured a way to do it. We need a loud, colorful, eye-catching picture with our signage in it that we can use in posters, in the aviation press, and a thing called eBase, which is the trade show where obviously all of us go every year in Geneva to choose this year's jet. I didn't really want to do it to begin with. I thought that's a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility. That old little niggly thing in the background, which has been there forever. Am I good enough? Will I be able to pull this off? And I said, why don't you get a local photographer to do it? Because, you know, yeah, I'd love to be involved, but I don't know how long it's going to take. And it's going to depend a lot on weather. And to cut a long story short, they said, there is no other opportunity. We like working with you. You do crazy, nutty stuff. And they invited me back. Now, I did a test shot for them. The test shot on the day I went to go and do a recce was of a blue sky with the sun in it and an aircraft and their signage. And they said, that's exactly what he wants. I said, yeah, but if the weather doesn't work, the photo won't work. And when we went to do this on the day, the weather was appalling. The shot I had envisaged needed sunshine at 5 o'clock in the afternoon with a blue sky, maybe a couple of clouds for it to work, but it didn't work. I was there all day long. I got 6 terrible, boring photographs. 1,000 boring photographs don't make up for the one that they need. That night, the hangar chief had said, we will leave the aircraft out overnight, if you like, because it looks like the weather might be better in the morning. And, you know, I'd like to thank you, Nick, because I knew that that morning they were going to be tearing the thing to pieces. They had created a one window, a one-day opportunity for me to get the money shot. The weather was appalling. Nick had said, well, leave it out overnight. You might get something. Now, the sun would be in the wrong place in the sky. I wanted the sun clipping the top of their hangar, but it would be coming, of course, from the opposite direction. I thought anything's better than these terrible, boring pictures that we've got. Marie and I went off. Marie is the person who hired me and has since become a good friend. We went off to a restaurant to get something to eat. She was like, well, you know, you did your best. You warned us that this could happen, but hey, you know, we'll talk about it tomorrow morning. While we're in the restaurant, just noticed a little glimmer of sunset light in the sky. And I saw it and said, Marie said, what do you think? Will we go to sunset? I said, no, because by the time we get to the airport, we'll have missed the sunset. But what follows sunset? Real question. Somebody shout it out, please. What follows sunset? Sorry, what was that? Yeah, thank you. Or more accurately, blue 5 minutes, because it doesn't last long, or it certainly doesn't most of the time. I thought, yeah, okay, we might get this blue hour thing. We went back to the airport. Marie rushed into the hangar, turned on all the lighting, and all the rest of it. There's nobody there. Luck. The wind was blowing in the right direction to make the clouds come towards the camera. Now, the guy in the restaurant, you know, we were in the restaurant and he was like coming out with the food. The French are kind of like, but monsieur, we have created this beautiful dinner for you. You know, where are you going? I threw in my wallet and just said, I'm sorry, we have to go now. I'm coming back. And we just left, much to his disgust. We turned on the hangar lights, set up the camera, and had just enough time for 3 frames. There was this one and 2 others. This is the one they chose for their poster. The only thing I want you to notice here is how much work did the camera do in all of that? How much work did the lens do? The camera did 3 minutes work. 3 1-minute exposures taken at night. I haven't got the other 3 pictures here. They belong to a different talk and there are other things. What created the photograph was unreasonable behavior, taking unreasonable action, understanding about light, yeah, and composition, yeah, and camera settings. You've got to know all those things, of course. Sorry, guys, I'm getting terrible feedback again. Can you maybe? Thank you so much. Yeah, it's knowing about the light and the composition, but it's the actions that we take. So I've got this wonderful memory of this incredible moment, which is the most rewarding, fulfilling commercial shoot I have ever been involved with, despite the fact I was like, I don't know about this idea. But it's the actions that we take that are important. Cameras and settings, honestly, there's 5 controls on a camera you need. A handful of features that are useful. The rest of it, most of it is just BS put there by marketing people to convince us that we need it. Think of those old photographers we spoke about of the past. They didn't have any of that. They took amazing pictures. So why do you need it? A camera is a camera is a camera is a camera. It doesn't matter what make it is. It doesn't matter what it is. They all do a great job of recording light onto a sensor. Of course, we have our preferred camera, the ones that we like that make sense to us. But the thing that creates the photograph and the memory and the time travel which goes along with it, backstory, is our actions, how we use light composition and how we think. You've got to think like a photographer. Being unreasonable, looking out the window in a restaurant and going, the light's changing. Let's go now, but the food's coming. Yeah, and what's more important? Do you want the shot or do you want the food? Go. You just do it. So that takes me on to, yeah, there are workshops and travel, and most of the pictures we've seen, they're just kind of like memories from the past, which are poignant to me. But the journey evolved. into taking small groups of people to amazing, interesting, different places. Cambodia, this mother and daughter, top left. It wasn't Cambodia, I apologize. That is in the north of Vietnam. But understanding about light and how light works. If you look at the light on their faces, it's a lovely, soft, but slightly directional light because there is a slight overhang, which you can't see in the picture, apart from the darker area at the top of that shot caused by its very soft, subtle shadow. That is blocking any downlight. So there are no shadows under their eyes or noses. It's a beautiful light for a portrait. Which is why I took the picture. If they were stood outside in the sun, I wouldn't bother to take the picture because it would look awful. These are things that photographers need to know. This is all part of the journey of trying things and getting things wrong, but recording moments that bring it all together. Your camera doesn't take pictures, we take pictures. All of these are just from workshops and stuff in different places, and they're all magical moments, and each one of them holds its own memory behind it. I like documenting moments. Not everyone does, but that's completely cool. And then one day I received this phone call from someone who'd been looking at YouTube. And this guy said, do you have a moment? I'd just like to chat to you about, your teaching. And we had this conversation, and I thought maybe he wants to come on a workshop, or possibly he's asking about one of the online courses, or I don't know. But it was a really interesting conversation. This guy obviously knew what he was talking about. I thought this guy really knows photography as well. He's, I hope he doesn't book me for a private training day. I'm not sure what I can teach him. We had this conversation, and then he said, look, he said, I'm the curator of the Exposure International Photography Festival in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. Would you be up for coming and teaching for us? And I'm like, blown off my chair. Does a fish swim? Yeah, absolutely. I said, of course. What are the dates? This is the bit which got me, because he'd done research. He said, yes, I know. He said, you're running a workshop in Cambodia, which starts on the Tuesday. We finish on the Sunday night at midnight. All I can say is there's a slight conflict there, but I guarantee you, you will be wherever you need to be in the world on time. People don't say that to me very often. And it's like, wow. And so that is how that journey began. I never, ever imagined in my wildest dreams that I would end up at this extraordinary thing, not once, but 3 times, 4 times. And that I'd get awards from His Highness, the Sheikh. Bottom right is the first time I was presented to him. The picture above it of the life size, the giant head and shoulders picture of me, is I had no idea that was arriving at the expo center and saw that. It was such a shock to be in a lineup 3 or 4 places back. There's a guy standing wearing a jacket looking out of the picture. Just behind him there's a picture of a guy wearing glasses, one of those giant headshots. That's Joe McNally, probably one of the most famous commercial portrait photographers there alive. He was always one of my heroes when I was in the caravan reading books. And there I am in this lineup with Joe McNally. But proudest of all was that middle shot with those gold awards. To stand there with Stephen Wilkes and Chris Rainier, both National Geographic photographers, with our awards. I've become very friendly with both of them, particularly Chris Rainier, the guy with the scarf around his neck. Chris Rainier's mentor was Ansel Adams. That guy carried the bags for Ansel Adams. Ansel Adams was the man who taught him about cameras. Ansel Adams was Chris's version of my Billy. And it has been an extraordinary journey. One of the things which I would urge any of you guys to do, if you have the opportunity, go to the Exposure International Photography Festival. It is not a trade show. It is not about the latest camera. Sure, there's some trade there. What you have is the world's greatest storytellers on that stage telling their stories. The picture on the left of the guy in the mask and the, you know, the feathers, the bird thing. That is Chris Rainier giving the opening talk. Chris did an amazing project for National Geographic, traveling the world, documenting and photographing societies that use masks within their rituals and beliefs. And that was him giving a talk about it. I strongly advise any of you guys, if you have the opportunity, go. It is free. Okay, you've got a flight and you've got a hotel. Sharjah isn't Dubai. It's not the cost that you think of when you think of the Arab Emirates and Dubai. Go. It is the most inspiring event you will ever hear. These people talking, the exhibitions, you can meet these people. There are no egos there. Everyone is chosen because they don't have an ego. The curator told me this. I'm not having people here who think they are the star turn. In this photograph, there are more Pulitzer Prizes than you could poke a stick at. We were being housed in a 5-star hotel. And where did these people say, come on, where should we go? Come on. There was a little Lebanese takeaway in the dusty street, just along and round the corner. And every night we would assemble and just talk and laugh and joke and hang out with the staff in this little restaurant. And I think that says a lot about the people that you find at the Exposure Festival. It says a lot about the truly great photographers. And just a nice little wrap up towards the end. I think pretty much everyone knows this cover of National Geographic. And I got, they had me interviewing people on the radio out there. I was running workshops, and in between workshops, I was having to go down to the studio and co-present and interview people. So that was me interviewing Steve McCurry, of course, the author of that photograph. And I've met some extraordinary people. But beyond that, someone else who is always there is a lady called Kathy Moran, who has been editor of National Geographic and is involved massively with the whole National Geographic. And I had the opportunity to tell her that story about how their magazine is responsible for the magical, wonderful, extraordinary life that I have had and the extraordinary people I've been privileged to meet, and the fact that I'm talking to you, lovely people, right now. It led me to the purpose. My purpose is to help people see more beauty in the world every day by thinking like a photographer. Because by sharing your images and stories and your experiences, maybe you'll help others see it differently too. Because there is a lot of beauty in this world. But Mike, what about all the ugly things that happen? Yeah. This was right after the start of the Ukraine war. Myself and some friends got together, a fundraiser, raised some funding, and helped an organization nearby that had all this aid, all this stuff they wanted to send to refugees. They couldn't get it there. We raised money, hired trucks, and the 4 of us drove trucks out to try and help. And those are just a couple of the photographs that I took that are harrowing and upsetting. And each one has some strong memories and feelings for me. I felt like an emotional vampire. But nonetheless, I thought it was an important story to be told. But where the very worst things, it's important to remember this, where the very worst things that human beings can do to one another, such as war, exist, so too to the very best. Every single one of these people are just magical, wonderful people. And every single one of these photographs in my time travel album transport me back to a different emotion, a different feeling, a feeling of total inspiration. Unloading, yeah, we're just quickly whizzed through all the boxes. Unloading the truck, 2 of my friends, 3 of my friends there, unloading the truck, one of the trucks, we drove down there with aid for these refugees living on mattresses on this huge sports hall that had been cleared of equipment. The man with the little dog, we met him on the road somewhere in Poland. He had heard about the war, wanted to help, filled his tiny little car with whatever he could get and started driving. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know what he was doing. He just saw us with the trucks and said, "Are you by any chance going to Ukraine with aid?" He said, I don't know where I'm going. I just want to help. And I brought what I can and will stay as long as I can. What an inspiring guy. And every single one of those people, there is a backstory, which I'm not going to go on about unless you particularly were to ask me to. But where the very worst things in life happen, so too do the very best. And I would urge you, use your phone or your camera and create a little time travel album. Because on those days when the tech doesn't work properly and things are not going as expected, scroll through that. Just remember and look at one of those images, all of those images, whichever image is relevant, or as many as possible, and reconnect with the thoughts and the feelings that you have that are associated with that image. The people that you met, what happened next? Did you laugh? Did you cry? Were you inspired? Whatever it was, just grab your phone. There is no excuse these days. You can make it a beautiful, amazing picture, which of course what we all want to do. We love photography, right? But what about those days when you go out with your camera, you're looking for a picture and nothing is working? And you're thinking, oh, this is pointless. I'm going to give up. I'm going to go home. I'm going to have a cup of tea, all that stuff. Get your little time travel album out. Have a scroll through. Just invest 5 or 10 minutes and look at things that remind you of your times of knowing, of your times of excitement, of your times when everything came together and just worked. And then go looking for the pictures, because I promise you, that is the key. Cameras don't take pictures, we take pictures. And our mindset and our journey is what creates those pictures. So that brings me to the end of that. If there's any Q&A, please do ask. But also, guys, what do you want to do? Do you want me to talk about what's coming next, or do you want to do it?
Well, it's getting late here, Mike, so I think everybody's getting a bit tired. But you were going to issue a challenge to us, I believe.
That's what I was saying. Do you want to issue the challenge, or I will? Okay,
yeah,
I've got a challenge for
you do it quickly.
I got a challenge for you. I'm coming back on the 9th of April to do some live feedback. Your challenge is to make an image about something that moves, touches, and inspires you. Your challenge is to make an image which conveys a sense of that passion to me. Now remember, using appropriate light will massively enhance your image. Compose it thoughtfully with care and combine these with camera skills to make the image pop. That is your challenge. I have sent it to Jane and Andrew, so they have it. There we go. I think I've stopped presenting. There we go. You guys have it, and of course can share it with everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So, yes, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, getting up so early for us to have you tonight.
You're welcome.
Mike got up. What time do you get up?
About 5 o'clock. About the time you get up when you come and join our challenges in the Photo Creative group.
True. Anyway, so Mike got up really early to come and talk to us tonight. So let's give him another. Or does anyone have any questions very quickly?
Yeah, anyone got any questions or observations?
No, it's stunned silence, sorry.
Either a stunned silence or like, will this bloke shut up? I want to go home.
So anyway, let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for being there, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. And good night, or good morning.
Or good night. Okay, right. Good night or good morning. So I guess we will speak outside of this group, yeah, and sort out what's next. Thanks again, guys. Good night.